Well, hello. This morning we have, well, 3 out of the 4 83 to 86 interceptors. So let's take a closer look. So what we have a I believe a 84 or 85 VF500F interceptor. We have a 84 a VF750F interceptor. And we also have a VFR750 interceptor, 1986. Now, we'll do a little backstory before we go into the comparisons. So the first Honda V4 to come out was the Magna and Sabre. So that'd be 1982. They started life as the VF750. In 1983, they redesigned a few aspects of the engine. The engine as a whole is extremely similar to the Magna Sabre engine, but there are a number of differences. Keep an eye out for a video where I do a side-by-side comparison of the Interceptor engine and the Magna Sabre engine. So yeah, this came in 83 after the Magna and Sabre had already pre-existed in 82. This engine turns a different direction than those, and this one is chain drive instead of shaft, and this has 5 gears instead of 6. And then there's a number of other differences like camshaft profiles, some different things here and there around the block and transmission, a bunch of stuff like that. Then in 1986, Honda had revised this engine yet again, but they had changed even more, and it is what they had then put inside the VFR 750s and 700s. Now the reason why we have 750s and 700s is because of a tariff that was placed on all motorcycles imported into the United States. And I should specify it. It was for any motorcycle over 700 cc. So anything that was a 750 that got imported to the US, there was a tariff fee involved for that to be imported. So, and the tariff fee was so high that companies like Honda and Suzuki just found it better to, yeah, we'll just drop the 750 and we'll turn them into 700s or 650s or 600s, and not a problem. So they did that instead, and they were able to keep their, keep their profits. And that went from 1984 to 1987. But with the Interceptors, in 1984, you could get this either way. You could have the 700, or you could, for a lot extra, you could have the 750. Performance-wise, you'd have a really hard time telling the difference between that 700 and 750. For 86, there's a big difference between the 700 and the 750. You're looking at a difference of somewhere between 10 and 20 horsepower. I'll put all the power specs down in the description so you can see it all. But that's, that's what you're looking at difference-wise. And again, for 86, when that came out, you could order up the 750 for extra cost, and those are quite desirable. But again, all this was only in America, not even just North America. It was strictly America that all this had happened. But we can get into the bikes. So this is what the 500s look like. Well, the 500s and 700s, I should say the early 700s, not the VFR. The VFR is kind of its own breed, but I have them here so you can see them. But the 500 and the 700 are quite similar. You can see they still use the same square tube steel frame, or at least the concept is extremely similar. They almost look identical, but when you get down side by side, I can promise they're not, and you can see they're not. I will also have a video on comparing the two frames and two engines side by side, so you guys can look into that further. That's another difference, is the engines are totally different. This VF500 engine that came about in the Interceptor and the V30 Magna for 1984 to 1986, thereabouts. I could be wrong. If I am, I'm sorry. I know the 700s and 750s better. These 500s are a little bit less common. Since we're talking about rarity, the most common will be the 84 to 85 VF700F. The 83's VF750s are a little less common, but still very common. The 84 750s, those are very hard to come by. The 86 750s are VFRs. Those are very hard to come by right now. The VF700s, they're equally hard to come by. I don't know how production compares between the two, but I've only ever seen three VFR 750s, and this is the first VFR 700 I've seen. So that's kind of how they all work out as far as production goes. But you can see there's some big differences between the bodies of these. You can see on the 500, it's got this kind of duckbill tail. Very reminiscent to what the 78 to 81 CBFs had. So that would be, you know, your CB750F, your CB900F, your CB1000F, and the CB1100F, as well as the CBX. You know, but of course, depending on what country you live on, each of those can be labeled something else. And there was also a CBX 650 or something like that sold overseas, and sadly I don't know too much about those other than mechanically they are our Nighthawks. I should say that. But yeah, otherwise all the VFRs are mechanically very, very comparable. They all have dual front discs. All these have the track anti-dive, and they all have adjustable fork tops. We'll be able to see those as I get closer to them. They also have rear chain. They're all rear monoshock. They all have rear disc brakes on them. They all have twin exhaust. They all have a two-person seat. The VFRs come with a bump delete, so it's a plastic panel that goes over the passenger rest. They're all V4s. They're all red, white, and blue, as you can see. Some of them came with blue seats. Some of them were purely black. And they all have 3-spoke wheels, but they are all different. All the wheels are totally different. You can see the 500. We'll get up next to that here. 500 has 3 spokes that are singles, whereas the 750 and 700 has 3 spokes that are doubled. And then the VFRs have 3 spokes that are single again, much like the VF500 Interceptor. They do all share the same turn signals. The stem length and how they mount onto the bike kind of varies between them. Also with these, all the gauge clusters are part of the fairing, not the steering stem or the handlebars. And then that's the same thing with the turn signals. They're all mounted onto the bodywork, not the actual the forks or the handlebars or anything like that. All these also use clip-on bars. You can see that. But we'll kind of go into these bikes one-on-one, and then you can check out some of the comparisons. But you can check this out. The 500 speedo reads up to a ambitious 150. The red line starts at 12 grand. This is how it looks from on the bike. It's got very interesting clamp-on mirrors. They go into Honda controls that normally have screw-in mirrors. These are clamp-ons. And they did that just because it was reminiscent of what the 700 and 750 has. When we go look at that, this is what I'm talking about. And these do the same exact thing. Where Honda would normally have a screw-in mirror, here they run a stud in there, and then the mirror clips onto that. I suppose it's handy at the track because now you don't have an arm that's taking up this space. Instead, your mirror is very close to your hand, and as you look through turns, you can actually see it. Oh, nuts. While we're here, the 750s do have a fuel gauge, the tax, red line. They all start somewhere between 10 and 11 grand, depends on the model. The 750s don't rev as high as the 700s. Because the difference between the 750 and the 700 is a few millimeters of stroke. So that little bit of extra stroke makes it so that the 750 can't rev as high, but it still makes the same amount of power, actually marginally more. This speedometer also reads to 150, but it doesn't strictly say it. It's just that last line is 150, and that's not too ambitious for this. These have no problem getting up around that 130 mark. And then there is a water gauge, or coolant temp gauge, but note how it is different than this one. It's got a small sweeping one down here, no fuel gauge. Well, these were pretty tricked out. They had just about everything. Very similar to the Nighthawk S. And this is what it looks like from the cockpit. Now we move on to our VFR. This is where the magic is. Now this is a customer's machine, and this has been put here so the gentleman could use his phone that has a more accurate speedometer, as well as GPS and a few other things. But this is what it looks like from in here. On the 700, speedo goes to 175, which you would think is ambitious, but it's boy, these bikes fly. Tachometer starts at 11,500, much like the 500. Focusing a little better here. And then there is a coolant temp gauge, coolant temp gauge. There is no fuel gauge. There is a fuel light, along with all the other essentials: turning lights, neutral indicator, a high beam light, and then an oil pressure light. And then this is what it looks like from the seating position. It's pretty nice. These mirrors do kind of get in the way while you're on the bike. The arms actually follow the windscreen quite nice. But if your head isn't in the windscreen, then it's viewing the edge of it, and that's not the most handiest of things. But you could always get like an RC30 windshield or something like that. I think we'll look at the tanks next. You can see the 500 looks like so. It's actually very close to the 700s, 750s, which is also pretty close to the VFRs. They're all shaped for the same look, but they all go about it differently. Like I mentioned before, the 500 has the duck bill, but the 700, 750 has something more like a Nighthawk S. And then the VFR, it has its own kind of thing. You can see there, but someone did lob off the fender liner. It doesn't look too much different than that. Just know that there is a little bar here, this guy. And this would normally come out a ways, just up here, pretty tight to the plastic, but ends around here, and that's what your turn signal would mount on. And then your fender liner would, it would just be fender liner. It's exactly what you expect. It's very close to this, and it does look presentable, but someone slimmed it up. So without the license plate, it does look pretty tidy. Now the 500s and the 700s, they're not full fared, unlike the VFRs. VFRs are full fared. This one is exactly how it leaves the factory, minus a few decals that have been added on over time. But the 700 and 750s, they all look like this. All you got was an upper cowl and a lower chin spoiler, diffuser, whatever you'd like to call it. And the 500 is the same way. You get an upper and a lower, you don't get a full. They all share the same petcock. at least cosmetically. There are some differences between them. Same with the gas cap. They all utilize a different gas cap, but they're all relatively the same function. You can see it's round. Now it's round with a bump out, and now it's the full racing petcock. Exhaust is pretty similar between most of these. With the normal VFs, they are black chrome pipes. That one's been scraped up, but black chrome. 700, 750, again more black chrome. And then the VFR, it's actually the stainless muffler, and it has real headers. So it's got 4 into 2. Yes, 4 into 2 headers. That's exactly what it's got. So 4 into 2, and then right after the 2 collectors, they go into the 2 exhaust manifolds without any sort of crossover or anything like that. There's all these earlier VFs, the non-VFRs. They just have the 2 head pipes that come from the front and go into a power chamber underneath for scavenging, and then the rears go down into that power chamber. And the VF500 is the same exact way, but of course between all these the pipe diameters are quite different. But yeah, that's kind of all there is between these. I know that the side covers of that engine are red. They should be a gloss black and smooth, much like how we've restored this one to be. It's really nice, tidy black and silver. While the VFRs, they use either magnesium or faux magnesium side covers and valve covers. So if they're not magnesium, they're aluminum that's been cast with a texture, and then they've been painted a nice metallic gold. Performance-wise and seating-wise, they're all similar. As far as seating goes, the foot pegs are all in the same exact spot. 8 inches or less away from the swing arm pivot. So that one was like 8. This one's like 6. You go to this one, it's like 5 and a little down, but the swing arm pivot is a little up. Yeah, so they're all comparative. You can kind of draw a center line from the foot peg to the seat. Kind of lines up with the crotch area of the rider. Same thing with this one. And again, same thing with this one. So when you hop on all of them, as far as your legs and your hips go, they all feel about the same location-wise. But seat height varies between each of these, and how far you hunch over to ride the bike changes a lot on each of these. Like the seat height for the 500 is kind of low. It looks high right now, but once you put a person on it, compresses the suspension a bunch, and it does get lower. VF700 is built for most people. Shorter guys might have a hard time mounting it. The VFR, it looks about what it is. It's only a tad on the tall side if you're a short person, but any person could mount this and they'd feel quite cozy. On this one, it's really built for you to be on the tank. If your entire tummy isn't touching the tank, you won't be all that comfortable on it. 700 is similar. If you put your entire body on the tank, it feels all right. Otherwise, you can keep a what I'd call a hunched riding position, because the handlebars are so far forward, you can't sit perfectly upright. So you take a little bit of a hunch, and that is still comfy. On the 500, things are a little different. Handlebars are a little closer to the seat, just because the tank isn't as long, and the length of the bike isn't as long. Specifically this dimension here. So the benefit of that is a shorter rider can hop on this, and they can ride almost upright. A tall rider like me, who's about 6 feet tall, and keep in mind most of my length is in my legs. When I sit on this, I'm darn near upright, but a little bit of hunk over, that's what I expect most people under 6 feet to look like on the bike. Performance wise, oh boy, these VFRs, they sure move. There's a few reasons for that. It really tweaked the engine some so it could spin like mad. It makes a lot of power. They moved one of the 2 crank pins offset, so when this runs, it growls. Whereas the other 2s, they growl, but it is different. I'd call it the difference between like a, oh boy, it's hard to say, but the old V4s, they have their own sound because all 4 connecting rods move at the same time, whereas this one, the 2 oppose each other at all times. So it makes for a unique sound and a unique power band. But the VFRs are also very light. They're much lighter than the VF700s and 750s. Much lighter, good 30-40 pounds. If I'm wrong, I'll say so, and I'll put all the specs in the description. Then the VF500 is actually pretty light. It weighs about as much as a VT500 Ascot does. It's a nice light engine, and the frame is, well, very similar to the VF700s, but because it's smaller, it just immediately makes it lighter than this. So these are all just a crazy awesome hoot to drive, but the VFR has the most power, maybe the least amount of weight, so it is definitely the fastest in a straight line. The VF700, it's got a lot of power, not as much as the VFR, but it's got a lot of power, but there is some weight there, so it moves very well. The VF500, now it makes great power for what it is, but it's no VF700, and it's, good grief, it's no VFR. So it moves about as good as you expect. Do not underestimate it, but don't expect it to hit that 150 mark on the speedo. So maybe you can picture that. But they all handle quite well. They're all very graceful. These VFRs, they like to lay down. I have all the bodywork loose right now. This is due for 2 new head gaskets, so it's just going to get the full top end rebuild. This engine's been completely rebuilt, and these handle very well. These just love the twisties. And the VF500s, they do turns well. Haven't been able to ride this one yet, but excited to someday. I have a whole bunch of these engines, so I have to go through them and pretty much rebuild all of them. Problem is with these V4s, the smaller they are, the more they're beat on. And that kind of makes sense. But, keep in mind, the bigger engines are going to take beating a little bit better because they're, the displacement is on their side. Like this 750 and this 750, you could be going all over between stoplights, no problem, for quite a long time before you start having issues. These 500s, you have to ring them out, and that's where you can run into some issues. But on the flip side, bikes that get wrung out usually don't fall down. So do keep that in mind too. Something light and nimble like that, less likely to go down than something big and heavy, or something ludicrously fast. But again, that's all relative. How you drive, where you drive, who's on the bike, etc., etc. But yeah, that's about all I can offer everyone. They are all pretty sweet machines. It's hard to pick a favorite for someone who likes casual riding. As far as casual riding goes, it is hard to pick a favorite. If you have access to all 3 of these bikes, the only one I don't have from the 80s is the VF750F. But I got the main 3. The 3 you will most likely see on Craigslist or Facebook, etc., etc. So whatever one fits you best, that is the one I recommend. You're welcome to look up all their stats online, but you'll want to try them out to find them out. You'll be impressed with that. And if you thought that was fast, hold on. But they are all sweet machines. We're excited to be able to hold many in our possession. But keep on the lookout. Someday soon we will have a comparison between, like I said, the engines, frames. Each of those will be separate videos. And I already have a video between all the Magnas, all the V45 Magnas. I'll have another video between the V45 Sabres. Also have another one between the V65 and V45 Sabres. Also have one between this V45 and the V45 Sabres and Magnas. And who knows, I might get around all of these with a nice V65, take some sweet photos, maybe make a grandiose video between all these, and then you guys can gawk over that. But I've probably consumed enough of your time. If you have any questions about these, or if you have any comments, definitely put them down below in the video. Interesting mods, your favorite thing about these, what tracks you like them taking them to, etc., etc. We like hearing about these bikes, and we like knowing that they're all safe out on the road and that they're keeping you safe out on the road. So, until next time.